the Starting Why podcast. Here we ask entrepreneurs, actors, investors, innovative, and artists on the why they are doing what they are doing, what motivates and drives them, and why can't they stop. We will start in 5.
Hey guys,
4,
this is Joe from Starting Why. And today again, I have a very nice guest here with me. Actually, he is currently located in a co-working space in Miami. Hey Luka, how you doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. Thank you. Totally my pleasure. We may tell our audience that this is not the first interview we ever had together. I was looking at my blog post from the past before this interview, and actually our first interview, where you've been my guest as well, was published in September 2016.
That's crazy. Yeah, time flies.
Yeah, quite some history. But first, tell us a little bit about you, what you did, and how you've gotten into entrepreneurship, and especially for this podcast, why you did it.
So I was always excited and thought that, school and university can only teach you so much. You have to just, get up and do something about it. And I found that, whichever job I could possibly get, it just wouldn't actually be rewarding enough to actually do it. And so I just, had very little money in my pocket just after graduating university. And I said, you know what, I'd rather be poor but happy than work for somebody else. And in reality, I basically never had a job before and just, went after it. And I decided to, try out my own luck.
I see. Try out your own luck. So was this like you went to high school, you went to college, and then you graduated, and then you thought, oh, now I want to be an entrepreneur? Or did you do something like entrepreneurial before that?
Sure. Yeah, so when I was 12, 13, I was actually selling quite expensive Nike sneakers, Nike SBs, and Jordans. Some people listening will probably know the hype around all that, and or Dunks and stuff like that. And, I was just kind of buying low, selling high. And so ever since really I was a kid, I was really excited about actually just doing something that creates value for people, essentially also makes them happy, but it's also rewarding for me, right? And I always wanted to be an owner, not necessarily somebody who's renting their time. And oftentimes that when you work for somebody, you're renting your time, right? Just collecting that salary at the end of the month. And I said, I'd rather put in the same amount of effort that I put in for somebody else, I'd rather do it for myself. So that was kind of my first touch with entrepreneurship at 12, 13. Then I went out, tried to start a company at 19, raised $500,000. That didn't work out well. We had to shut the business down. And then I finished university, moved to Berlin with basically not much or better said with nothing. And I said, you know what, if I could do that at 19, I could probably do it at 22. And I sat down with my Penta co-founder, who's also my Index co-founder, and we said, hey, why don't we actually, help small business owners save a lot of time and money by giving them a bank account that actually works. And that was our last venture.
And that was when we met. I was wondering, did your family think you're totally crazy? You first had a venture that did not work out. Of course, it's completely understandable that you want to start it again, but then actually relocate to even another continent, to a country where you don't necessarily speak the language. What was kind of the feedback you've gotten there?
Yeah, sure. Up until maybe 2 years into building Penta, my father would still call me, ask me when I'm going to go to law school. Just didn't believe in it. But one of my friends just always says, Luka's life, Luka's rules. So I just live by my life and my rules.
Admittedly, I can't imagine you as a lawyer.
No, definitely not.
That's a very big stretch of my imagination, I have to tell you. When you thought about doing Penta, what were your thoughts there and how did you prepare? Because this is all about entrepreneurship and starting successful ventures. So let's dig a little bit into your secret sauce, how you built up Penta, which was eventually bought by Finleap, another Berlin-based company, incubator turned investor.
Yeah, just the buying part, I think that was a bit of a PR mix-up. We actually never got bought by Finleap. That was more just a funding round. The company has actually went on to raise over 70 million venture capital. The last round, I think, was close to a 30 million Series B, so it never was an acquisition, but rather an investment. But in terms of the secret sauce, so first of all, I've been reading books my whole life, and a lot of them. And I started reading a lot of business books when I was 14, 15, and it's really been 5-6 years of reading a lot of books, 1 or 2 books per week at some point. And when I first went out, together with my co-founders to figure things out. In reality, at that point, there was only 2 of us. We sat down and we said, hey, let's speak to 20, 30, 50 small business owners to better understand some of the problems that they're dealing with. And what we did was very simple. We didn't write any code. We didn't, spend any crazy money marketing. We didn't try to raise money. What we did is we built a really simple landing page. And it basically said, hey, we're building the best business bank account. If you're interested, leave your email address. You couldn't even scroll on it. And then we went on Twitter and then liked random people's tweets. We liked up to actually, it was 17,000 tweets at that point. So at some point I was just standing for 6 hours, sitting in my room, clicking, liking and retweeting and direct messaging people 17,000 times, if not more. And basically, based on that, we were just getting feedback from people and speaking to people. And our goal was, if we can get 100 people to sign up for the wait list without building any code, then, everything else will take care of itself. So the next thing that happened is we applied for an incubator accelerator, which is called Startup Bootcamp. And with our initial traction, we were able to raise our first small amount of money. It was 15,000 euros. And then one thing led to the next, and yeah, there you go today.
You already gave me an answer I would have asked for right now, because many startups, many entrepreneurs, they basically fail at the first step. So you did a very good step by interviewing your potential clients. I can think of a lot of people who did not do that. And then you build a landing page. Actually, there's now a lot of stuff out there, where you have like toolboxes where you can build 8 landing pages for something like $15 a year. So it doesn't have to be expensive. You said you went around, liked and retweeted on Twitter, which is a good approach. But with the new algorithm, will you still think that this would work? And what else would you right now try to get the first interactions, to get the first likes, to get the first sign-ups for this? And another question, you said like 70,000 likes and retweets or something. And how many sign-ups did this get you?
So the point of the liking, and it was 17, by the way, but not 70. 70 is a bit too much, but we were just trying to do everything to get noticed. And that was primarily the goal, right? We didn't know what we were doing. We just knew that, hey, let's get initial traction. Let's build a wait list. Let's validate before building or even raising money. And then everything else will take care of itself, including, getting customers. And second, most importantly, getting investors. First, the most important thing is customers. But did those likes and retweets, generate customers? I'd probably say no, but it definitely did give us the opportunity to get in touch with people, to help us essentially build out the product. But, even today with my new company, Index Health, which is a personalized healthcare company based in the US, we also haven't written a line of code yet. We do have customers, admittedly, and we're growing, and pretty quickly. It's just more of a question of that we just try to have as much low tech as possible, because so we can focus more on actually understanding the customer, understanding what exactly to build, getting to product market for a better set, getting to the point where we're comfortable to scale. And then writing code is easy. A lot of founders think that, hey, I'm going to start my company, I'm just going to start writing code. I mean, these days, just writing code has just really never been easier. It's more about what are you going to build instead of just going out there and building it. So we're taking that approach.
Yes, exactly. That's also something I've found very useful, and it's something that is kind of underrepresented in the usual startup media, because then there are like people sitting there for days and nights and weeks and months and writing code, and then bam, it's successful. But actually, I met a few people who did that, and this bam success never really happened. So this validation of the idea is a very important point. Talk to as many potential clients as possible. In Germany, you always get, oh, they'll steal my idea. But I also realized something, especially in interviews with my other podcasts, because it's always good if you can point to a successful competitor that is already getting funding, that is already getting traction, and you can say, well, I'm as good as them, and I do this and this and this better, and I have here a different opportunity, and so on and so forth. For example, I remember a Book a Tiger, an interview I did, which is a home cleaning service, and that was also helping their competitor, and actually they helped each other because they were both successful. They both showed the business model is actually working. And then eventually Book a Tiger went more into corporate business and started cleaning buildings and offices and something like this. So talk to the people early. And if you get competition, it doesn't have to be necessarily bad, even though competition also keeps you on your toes. I think there's a lot more you can add to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd actually like to say that competition is probably the best thing that can happen, because then you know that it works. And oftentimes it's actually good to get compared because you know how to position yourself. When you don't have competition, you're just completely lost in the dark. Customers may not know what you're building, what you're not building. Raising money becomes inevitably more difficult because everybody's not sure what this is going to work or not. It's a completely new idea. So, you know, when I speak to founders and saying like, oh, you know, we have no competition, it's immediately a red flag.
Yes, I know. For example, I had an interview guest. He founded a digital health insurer called Autonova. And he said for his fundraising, it was extremely important that Oscar in the US did it successfully. They proved the model to be right. They could get funds raised with that, and that actually helped him. I really like that quote. If you don't have competition, that's a red flag. I think you're always good for some amazing quotes here. But let's get a little bit back to when you like to read books. What would be the books you would strongly recommend to aspiring or new entrepreneurs?
I would definitely start off with biographies of people that, you know, look up to or aspire to be, right? I think it's always good to have some sort of mental framework of, you know, where do you want to get to? I think that gives direction to people, especially young people, because, you know, when I just started building stuff, I was a teenager basically, and Penta happened when I was 22, and I'm 28 today, right? So I'm looking at it from kind of a, you know, very young person's perspective. So definitely biographies. The one book that changed my way of thinking and that really rules the whole industry is the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Everybody says they've read it and heard about it, but nobody really, you know, implements it properly. So I'd suggest reading that to basically anybody. Another really good book is Trust Me, I'm Lying by Ryan Holiday. I think it's a good understanding of how, you know, how the world works in terms of marketing, PR, and what gets attention and what doesn't. But I would start off with those two or three books and a couple of biographies, and then what I would normally do is that I would pick those books out that they're mentioning, and that kind of gives me entrance into other books, ideas, and people that I find really, really interesting, inspiring, and that teach me things.
And I also found that a lot of successful entrepreneurs also like the big thinkers' philosophy. For example, if I don't forget it, I'll share here in the show notes. There is an interview where Brad Feld is interviewed, one of the co-founders of Techstars VC and so on and so forth, on the Daily Stoic, where they talk about Friedrich Nietzsche and Stoic philosophy and stuff like that. So I think it's really important in many different aspects to build, as you said, a mental framework. That is also a lot of entrepreneurs are talking about. Can you give us a little peek into your mental framework?
Yeah, sure. And by the way, my WhatsApp photo is Nietzsche. As you know, obviously, you have me on WhatsApp. So yeah, I mean, that's I'm a huge fan. I studied philosophy as well in university. But my mental framework, I actually haven't thought of that. It's more that, you know, what's very important for me is that, and I'm sure everybody can relate, people live very much in the future, scared about what's going to happen, kind of that anxiety about that, and then regrets in the past, or at least thinking about the past. And what's very important for me is to be in the present, just being here and now in this very moment. I think that's extremely important, especially when building a business, because it can get quite scary. You get a lot of anxiety about a lot of things. I also meditate twice a day, or at least I try to, but I do meditate at least once a day. And so that kind of helps put me in that framework. But I'd say that it all circles down to just being here and now. And that helps control essentially, how you're thinking, what you're focused on. I feel like a lot of people won't find that very helpful as advice. It's not like, Steve Jobs be a perfectionist or whatever it is. And Steve Jobs is also, if you actually read a lot of his biographies, it was also to be very much in the moment. And so I just think it's just very important to be stoic. Ironically, you mentioned that. So unemotional, here in the moment, and just kind of understanding your own fears and insecurities and long-term intentions. In addition to that, I think very long-term. I try to at least. I'm always thinking, what's true in 10 years from now. A good example is, in 10 years from now, will there be more electric cars or, engines on the road, right? And so just thinking about these types of things, whether it's technology or, how does medicine look like in 10 years from now, right? Banking, whatever it is, it's really just putting yourself in a very long-term perspective and mindset. And if you don't, you're just optimizing for the short term, you're inevitably going to lose.
I actually hear also quite frequently about meditation. I have to admit that I use a meditation app almost every evening. I do it when I'm already in bed and do a relaxation meditation just to calm me down. And then I listen a little bit to the audiobook and boom, I'm gone. So that helped me a lot. And I only discovered it in my 30s. So I wish I would have done it much, much earlier. I think a lot of the benefits are totally fine. But for me, it was like I was feeling 90% less stressed. That was just amazing for me. So we took from you now, talk to your clients. You don't need a lot of money to start your startup. When you do it, build a mental framework, read a lot of books, and meditate. I would be curious. One of my interview guests said he is writing basically rules down and then then over time follows them, and he then realizes if they need adjustments or if they okay. So that is a way of him building a mental framework just for himself. It doesn't have to be necessarily Gibbs rules. I think there's 70 something out there, but do you also do something in that way? Not exactly like that.
I mean, definitely, some sort of reflection. I think it's something that you think about every day. I mean, as a company, we have retros. I'm often thinking about writing things down, but I think the most important, because it's just kind of adding to what you just asked and what I previously said, is that it's the most important thing actually above meditation, being here now, etc., all that stuff, is surrounding yourself with really great people who are very positive, who help bring you up. And even if you have a trade-off with somebody who's, let's say good at what they do, but is extremely positive and great, versus somebody who's great at what they do, but is very negative and just not helpful, always choose the good one, because that person can actually strive and actually change to actually be great, right? And I think that the number one thing that's actually screwed me up when doing anything, whether it's a friendship or building a business, it's been around the people that I surround myself with, and that's really something that's so detrimental to actually your life, right? And I've actually taken people out of my life that have been detrimental, that have been very negative, and who have been bringing me down. And I just try to surround myself with people that I know that are just going to bring me up, are positive. And, and I can obviously do the same vice versa. So I think in terms of reflecting, I think I'm always reflecting, who am I around? You're the average of the 5 people that you're around, whether that's a book, a TV show, or a physical person, right? And so my 5 average, I always try to surround myself with super smart, positive, and helpful people or books.
I see. I just try to imagine myself, what I would be if I take really the average of those 5 people, especially taking into account that we just more or less getting out of Corona. So it will be quite a lot of my 2-year-old son. That would be pretty interesting to have a composite there. I'm also wondering, because we're now talking a lot about business, a lot about doing business, and you already started kind of opening the door to other parts of the life. So do you have, for example, some rules you established for working and not working? Because as you said, you're taking a very long-term view. And something I realized when I set out by myself to be an entrepreneur, that I have to think in terms of not until the next vacation, but maybe I have to be healthy, relaxed, and on the top of my game until maybe end of next year. So I already have to plan accordingly my work hours, my vacation, that I also take vacation. Also establish private rules. For example, I don't work on the weekends. I don't look into my emails on the weekends. That is one of my personal rules already. Do you also have some, let's call it limitation on work?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I was guilty of not having any rules previously. I just work those 12 hours, 15, whatever it is, right? And then just be burned out, a month later. So I definitely didn't have any rules before. And going into building my new company, Index, I decided that I'm going to have actually very strict rules. Because, I'd say the number one rule is definitely, understanding, why you do these things. Oftentimes, I was driven by fear or, insecurities. We're kind of just looking at the runway and saying, oh, we have to work harder or whatever it is, right? Speaking about it in Penta, right? But in my new company, Index, it's just a different perspective where it's like, I try to take off a week per quarter. If it's not a week, then I'll take off 2 or 3 days, here, 2 or 3 days there, so it kind of adds up. Work hours wise, I don't have some sort of set limit, but generally I'm working from like 9 to 6, 9 to 7, and or even basically something like that. And I think it's just more about understanding your limits. But we definitely push all employees in the company to take a week off per quarter, and just to make way for certain things that help your health, right? So we have OKRs and goals actually set where you have to have your own health goals. I just think those things are just so important. A lot of the times founders and founding teams especially are going to compromise on things like that. But if your mind isn't clear, and if you don't have a healthy body, then you just can't have a healthy mind. And so we definitely prioritize things like that. I mean, my number one rule is really just surrounding myself with great people, and just being cautious about how I work and what I worked into, so that I don't repeat essentially the same mistakes. So yeah, I definitely do have some sort of framework.
I also realized when I started out almost a year ago that in the beginning I was always pushing very, very hard, working until midnight, like 2 or 3 days a week, which was pretty convenient because I could just walk out and get into my bed. But then I realized it takes you quite some time until you come down from the adrenaline and can actually get rest, which also made me realize that I can't do this because it limits my sleep further. Plus, I didn't have enough time on the weekends to really recover, which then led me to being sick. So I'm really trying to limit late work hours to 1 day a week. That's, for example, another of my rules. And everybody is now strongly encouraged to also think about that. I really, really like the rule, what you're saying, like taking off 1 week a quarter or some days a quarter. That is a very important rule. Actually, what I do, I stick to my wife's vacation schedule because she is still employed, and that makes it quite easy to always take the right amount of vacation. That helped me a lot. But let me skip a little bit here, touch another topic, because you said in your company you have OKR rules, personal health goals, and you encourage your employees to take 1 week off per quarter. Can you talk a little bit about what other rules you have and how this fits into the company culture? Because that's something I found very interesting, even though it's not completely new to startups, but to have this combined in a bigger system, not only to say, yeah, work-life balance is very important for me. Oh, by the way, can you work through the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're just always encouraging things like that. So if we see that, sometimes you can't do it. So it's also the reality of having a small team, deliberately small, right? And making a decision saying, hey, we don't want to hire additional people, but at the same time, we just try to push people to, take the afternoon off, go to the gym, and everybody has their goals. It's something that we track over time. Too many rules is just too many rules, right? And some rules are just, if they're not being followed, then they're not rules anymore. And so at the end of the day, it's also up to people to follow their own rules and actually want to do it, right? You can't force anybody to take time off, but you could tell somebody like, hey, why don't you take a day off here or 2 days there? So yeah, I mean, it's up to the person, right? And that's also going back to, hiring people who are not only smarter than you, but who also just understand the point, right? So if these people aren't, conscious enough that, they have to take some time off, go to the gym, or, do what they have to do to stay mentally and physically fit, then nobody can help them.
Is this also a question for hiring people for you? Do you regular work out or something like that? Or is it just an encouragement after you've hired those people?
Both, definitely. I mean, we're very small now. What is that going to look like in a year from now? I have no idea, but it's something that we do interview for, actually. So when we're speaking to candidates, we ask them, how do you look at health? We are a health company at the end of the day, right? So if you're not passionate about, not only helping people, improve their health, but changing what health really means, then we're probably not the right company to work at. So our culture is also what we do, right? So if you don't kind of resonate with our mission and the values that we have as a company and the goals that we have, then you should probably get a job elsewhere.
You just touched another important point I wanted to talk about with you is hiring people. I already talked to a lot of HR managers, headhunters on podcasts offline and stuff like this, but I always see, especially in startups, the importance of the first hires, especially those people you don't know for like a few years, people that you've never met before that you have to hire. They're actually crucial to your company's success. How did you approach hiring the first people for your small team there? Is there something like a guideline, a book, some rules you're following, or just gut feeling?
Yeah, I mean, for Index now, I have the luxury that I have a pretty strong network and I know quite a lot of people. So, whether it's through friends or family or whatever it is. So I think with hiring now, it was a bit easier. But it definitely does come down to gut, right? And to intuition. It's understanding what is this person's goals and intentions. And it just, it's a much more different profile hiring for early stage pre-seed and seed company than when you hire somebody for a Series A or Series B company, right? The employee profile is completely different. And so, I remember, basically at Series A, Series B, you have people, talking about their pension and thinking about, Social Security and all that type of stuff, while people at seed understand that, the salary is going to be, small, but the potential upside is going to be huge. So it's a different type of hustle. It's really just a different type of profile. And so yeah, I mean that I just based basically on my experience and my intuition.
When you said you hire people differently for pre-seed, seed than for Series A, Series B, I was wondering, how do you deal with the people you still have from pre-seed, seed that may or may not fit then in the company?
That just shows with time. Some people, and Ben Horowitz is the hard thing about hard things, he addresses that as well. It's kind of like, you hire somebody today, but then they're like, oh, but will they be able to, to go IPO or, Series B or scale a team to 100 employees or whatever it is. And I think it's such an irrelevant question. It's like this person should be able to tackle the problems at hand today, today and tomorrow, not in 6 months or 6 years from now. And so when looking at these people, either they make it or they don't, right? But that's more for them to see in something that they'll realize on their own and that the company will just see. So it has little to do with predicting the future and more to do with, can this person tackle the problem right now?
I once heard the quote that forecasts are always difficult, especially concerning the future. So you're not the only one there. And definitely, if you would have figured out how to forecast a lot of stuff, we wouldn't be talking right now here. You would reside in your own country. So I think, Luka, so far you've talked about your rules, recommendation of books, early startup companies, hiring people, your own philosophy, and a little bit including health goals in a company, in an OKR. So I would like to say thank you very much. We touched a lot of topics, and everybody who'd like to learn more, down here in the show notes, there will be a link to your LinkedIn profile where people can reach out and, of course, learn more if they follow you.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Completely my pleasure. Thank you very much.